The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
All right, Marty, I am really excited to learn from you today. You have an intense background that's very different from mine. And so, yeah, I'd love to explore that. Can you start off by just reminding me, giving me a little bit like an overview of your background?
Sure. So I joined the Navy when I was 17. Basically, the day after I turned 17, I was in boot camp. I originally trained to be an air traffic controller, radar operator for about 17 weeks. And then through a mistake of orders, I got sent to the Navy SEAL training selection course in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than help me find a way out, they talked me into volunteering. So I ended up doing 20 years as a SEAL and retired, went right into managing money for United Bank of Switzerland. Did that for about 8 years. And then I started management roles in various businesses, starting at kind of the director, VP level. And I've been a CEO for the last 15 years.
Got it. Okay. And CEO, what are you doing at that in that role?
Right now, it's CEO of a healthcare company that I originally found. Our organization, our holding company, purchased that. I had one employee and only worked within the Beltway of Richmond, Virginia. Now it has 95 doctors and nurses, 20-something employees. Were scattered all over Virginia and North Carolina and Maryland.
Got it. Okay. So when we first...
There were other companies before that in the same kind of conglomerate that we spun out eventually. So,
got it. All right. Well, when we first talked, one thing that piqued my interest, I think I shared with you, I'm very interested in exploring consciousness and psychology and the ways in which, psychological operations take place and resilience and kind of all these different mental skills and attributes, and even the ways in which the mind is manipulated and how to defend against things like that. Where should we go? Like, what is your area of expertise related to that?
I'd say that if you start at the beginning of my exposure to such things, it was as a being a child in a divorced family and leading up to the divorced family, trying to deal with what I was being told as opposed to what was really happening and the deterioration of that family. And my mother was a schizophrenic alcoholic, which I didn't know, but that was the root cause of a lot of the crazy and chaos me and my brother and sister were experiencing. But what I found much, much later in life, looking back, was you have kind of two different paths when you're faced with that kind of uncertainty, especially as a young person. You either kind of succumb to it and feel like you're out of control, and so you're kind of a victim of that, and it's hard to shake off that mindset. You kind of go from one situation to another, thinking, well, the tables are turned against me, the odds are against me, whatever, and there's nothing I can really do to change any of that. It's almost like a fatalistic approach. The other path is you kind of get pissed off and you say, all right, this isn't about me. This is about those people. And I don't want to be part of this mess. So I have to start looking out for myself. I've started thinking for myself, acting on my own behalf. And that's the path I took. And in later years, when people asked me about, what was it like trying to get through the SEAL selection course, I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it for quite a few years afterwards. But it's the psychological resilience of that early experience. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't think I would have made it through the SEAL selection course, because they challenge your mental attitude about life and your own self-worth and your ability to put one foot in front of the other. And so that's kind of my first exposure to it. The second would be the SEAL selection course. But, if you've already been through kind of a crucible of lies and the reality distortion and everything that I went through, having instructors script and create all kinds of wacky scenarios where they're telling you one thing, but they're going to do something else. I watched guys around me, their fuses just popped and they couldn't handle it because they were used to very linear truth, either from a very conventional family. They had no psychological resilience built up. So they basically fell for every single solitary scenario that was set up by the instructors.
Can you give me an example of one of those scenarios?
Yeah. So And I went back and I was in charge of that selection, the first phase or
Excellent.
it's 8 years later, so I know a little bit about the architecture. And it didn't when I was going through. So you basically have you tell everybody that, all right, we're gonna have a PT in the morning after you run a mile 2 and a mile back from chow. And that means you get in a big formation and you do calisthenics for about an hour and a half. And then when you get in that position, they say, okay, there's been a change, get in the classroom. So you all pile into the classroom, and then they have a safety briefing for a 13-mile sand run with boots. So they go through the elaborate show of a safety briefing in great detail, and they have instructors in there, and they're saying, you got the ambulance, got it. You got 2 outrigger runners. Yep, got it. I mean, they really put a lot of effort into the showmanship of it.
Mhm.
You get out into the compound, and you say you've got 10 minutes to get out on the beach in formation pointing south towards Mexico. And 10 or 15 students wouldn't go to the beach. They just go over and quit. They'd ring the bell and quit.
Interesting.
The mere concept of something that seemed so onerous to them was enough to make them say, "To hell with this." I was prepared for PT. I was prepared for doing jumping jacks and push-ups. I wasn't prepared for a 13, 14-mile run. And so that's one situation. Another situation is where
And then would they proceed to do the run, or was that
no,
also
they
no?
quit.
Well
Oh, you
well,
mean
yeah,
yes,
the
yes.
others.
They might take them on a 4-mile run or a 5-mile run.
Okay, yeah, alright.
And so, you do that, "Oh, this is a trick." They were just tricking people, and then a week later, they tell you you're gonna go on a 4-mile run or a 5-mile run, and they take you on a 12-mile run. And so you're like, you can't trust anything they say, and
Yeah,
that's the point of that is combat.
mhm,
Once the first shots are fired, everything that you think you know about the target, the enemy, everything, it all blows up. They could be anywhere and everywhere, it could be doing anything,
yeah,
and you have to have a mental understanding of that chaos and be comfortable with it. You have to be comfortable with not knowing the truth or having the truth be yanked out from under your feet with
mhm,
with no logic or rhyme or reason. So that's essentially one scenario in the selection course, or there's a couple there, that people couldn't handle.
okay. Alright, this is totally off the wall, and you did not have any chance to prepare for this, but off top of your head, do you think you could take me through an actual exercise now? I know you can't take me on a 13-mile run, but, like, I don't know, is there anything that you could do right now?
You know, I could describe it. It's the
Okay,
thing about the SEAL selection course is it's a psychological game constructed using physical drivers, and the physical drivers of pressure are fatigue.
yeah,
And so what you do is you start them running and swimming and doing obstacle courses, and I mean, doing PT, you might do 500, 600 push-ups just in one session. So these are maximum efforts when you're doing these things.
mhm,
And, the next day comes and you're doing the same level. The next day comes, you're doing the same level. The next day comes, maybe you're doing twice as much.
mhm,
And you get a bunch of people to quit. You basically got them conditioned into a 2 or 3 day, "This sucks, but I know exactly how much it sucks," and then you make it suck twice as bad and people walk away.
mhm,
And you don't have to do anything as an instructor, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to yell or make a big, a lot of theatrical, presentation. You just basically let the environment and the event do its work. So, in my case, our class started with 126 people. They had been chopped down from probably 4 or 500 that tried to get into that class, and we lost 60 of them in the first 3 weeks. So
mhm.
60 people had quit. We started Hell Week, and by the end of Hell Week, we had 24 in 1 week. So
24 left or 24 quit?
24 left. So
Oh,
we've gone from 126 to 24 in
yeah,
30 days. And of those 24, a bunch of them were beat up, sick. A couple of them, got rolled back. So we ended up graduating with 13 originals 6 months
wow,
later. It's only 13 out of the 126. And that's a normal attrition.
uh-huh,
But most of it happens in that selection process. And the Green Berets have a similar thing, but they use rucksack marching up in the mountains.
yeah,
And in that situation, they know you're gonna get lost. And then how do you handle it? Because there's a time limit on how long you can be out there. So the only way you can make it up is you have to basically run with a 100-pound pack on your back. So you're punishing yourself for making the mistake of being lost.
Yeah.
So you got all that head stuff going on, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's the gist of the special operations selection process worldwide.
Mhm.
Is you don't. It's the exact opposite of what you see like in a movie about the Marine Corps, where they're screaming at you and yelling at you, getting in your face. It's just really quiet and subtle and very calm, and guys are standing around with a cup of coffee, and it's like, something like, who likes jumping jacks? Hey, everybody likes jumping jacks. All right, next exercise is jumping jacks. Take a sip of coffee, and you go, forever, begin. Not not doing 30, not doing 25, and 5 minutes later, you have these incredibly, conditioned young athletes twitching trying to do jumping jacks because that's what happens when you try to do jumping jacks until you can't do jumping jacks anymore.
Mhm.
It's an experience they never anticipated.
Mhm.
There's stuff like that, here's another one. Everybody hangs on a pull-up bar. So you got, 80 guys on this big, long pull-up bar system, and if anybody drops in the first 60 seconds, the whole class is gonna hit the ocean, which is cold. You're gonna roll around in the sand, you get all screwed up, you come back in here, and you go back up and do it all over again.
Mhm.
Well, somebody's gonna fall off the bar in 60 seconds, just a dead hang, you're not doing any pull-ups. And then, like, you do what you said you're gonna do. You send them out, they come back. Now it's even harder because you got sand, wet hands with sand trying to
Wet.
climb a
Yeah.
metal bar. And it's same deal. Anybody falls within 60 seconds, somebody's always gonna fall within 60 seconds. You know it as the instructor.
Mhm.
You didn't have them do a single pull-up. All you had to do is just hang on there, and yet they're kind of punishing themselves, and eventually you watch and see if they turn in on the people that are falling off the bar. Are they turning
How
in?
often does that happen?
It happens a lot and in the early couple of weeks because
They start yelling at them or, like, picking
yeah,
on them with it?
because they're
Yeah.
immature and they think that because they don't understand it's a game. They don't understand
Yeah.
that
Right.
around the 3rd week, they start figuring out they're not gonna win no matter what. The scenarios are never gonna get any better, they're only gonna get worse, and so people start to come up with their own ways of handling that. The ones that have prior experience with psychological resilience
Mhm.
seem to grip it and understand it quicker.
Yeah.
And then they tend to be anchors for a lot of other people that haven't really figured it out, because once you understand it, all of a sudden you have a sense of humor again. And if
Mm.
you have a sense of humor, people wanna be around you. So you start to see these little flashes of unintentional leadership by example, by smiling when things are getting bad or telling a joke, and people start saying, "I gotta get by those guys." They start gravitating towards that.
Yeah. Right.
At the same time, people start gravitating towards the people that wanna quit and are coming up with some really good excuses on why they should quit. So the
Interesting.
split starts happening at the beginning of the 3rd week.
Huh. So, just real quick, just in case, because 'cause I'm always curious, is there anything you can take me through on a Zoom call, or is that not really possible?
Well, I can make you do jumping jacks forever. We sit for 5 minutes and see what you look like at the end of it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
But, try it yourself. I mean,
Yeah,
just stand in front of a mirror and do jumping jacks. They're fairly easy for most people to do.
sure.
Put a clock or something down and just keep doing them. And you think, "Oh, I can do jumping jacks. They're easy, right?" The first 10 are real easy,
Sure.
but you're not used to your body failing you.
Mhm.
Most people that are, 18, 19 years old aren't extreme athletes. They're not mountain climbers. They're not, endurance or, endurance athletes, trail runners, they don't have any of that experience with going past the limits and
Right.
touching the limits of their abilities. And they assume if the action that you're actually the activity you're asking of them is simple and they've done it before, they understand it and they don't.
Mhm. So, it sounds like all the resilience training had involved some sort of physical component, not purely psychological.
It's it's purely psychological, but you can't get to the psychology that's going on between everybody's ears unless you fatigue them to
Yeah.
where they start to
Yeah.
question everything.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
own motivation to be there, um, the reasons why they decided to go there. If your reasons for being a special operator are shallow, like you saw the movies, you wanna be like those guys, that's not gonna be strong enough to get you through most of the conversations going on in your head.
Mhm.
You're doing it because your dad was in the military. Might be a little stronger motivation because you don't wanna let somebody down or you wanna have somebody be proud of you. But I knew a lot of guys that were in that situation, they still ended up quitting. So
Mhm.
I think that you basically have to decide if you're doing it because you're not going to let something or somebody beat you down and cause you to quit. And that's
Mhm.
a self-reliance, self-determination point of view. And I think I probably got there 2 days into Hell Week where I really it solidified. And I knew, okay, they can kill me, but I'm not gonna quit. There's nothing they're gonna do to me. I could pass out on a run, I don't care, I'm not gonna quit.
Mhm.
So and you're saying that that's the voice that's going on in your head, that's the narrative because you've come to that conclusion. And probably everybody around you that's still there in the second day of Hell Week has already come to that same conclusion.
So for you, did that voice continue? Or what I'm curious about is if the guys who end up getting through, do they typically adopt a disassociation pattern, or where the voice is gone, they're just, like, kind of watching themselves, watching their body fail, and they're kind of somewhere else, or do they lean into it somehow?
Well, there's two answers to that question. The first one is you do it's not it's a little bit of affirmation because it makes you feel like your brain is in line with what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. But it's really simple stuff. Just putting you say to yourself, "I'm just gonna make it to lunch," or "I'm just gonna put one foot in front of the other. I'm just gonna make it to that hill over there."
Yeah.
And you make it there and you say, "Okay, I did that. My brain forced my body to do things it didn't wanna do, and so I have this ability." So you realize it, you understand it. What really makes you stronger is when you get into a SEAL team and you're surrounded with 5, 10, 15 people with the same mindset,
Mhm.
and it's almost like an amplifying effect. I mean, body language, the way people's eyes look, the tone of their voice, and the sense of humor. Everybody that's gone through this has a Green Berets are the same way, huge sense of humor. The worse it gets, the funnier people get because it's like, "Hey, what the hell?" "There's nothing we can do about it. This sucks, so let's just figure it out and move forward." And it just like you don't have to rely on yourself as much anymore, even though you could if you had to, because you're being reinforced by all these people that have the same point of view, the same approach to chaos and crisis and fear and huge challenges.
So it seems like that sense of humor, to me, that doesn't really sound like, I don't know, it's not quite dissociation, like, it's almost like, acknowledging the absurdity of what's going on, so it's not dissociation, but it's reframing, maybe?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably reframing. It's
Yeah.
and because you may not be a funny person by design.
Uh-huh.
And there were people that were, quiet and introverted and all that, but when most of the people around you are cracking jokes about the thing that's going wrong,
Mhm.
it's like a fever, you tend to see it that way too. You're like, "Yeah, this is pretty stupid." And the more, the more stupid and the crazier it is, the funnier it seems because and here's another part of it. When SEALs or Green Berets watch movies about special operators, like a Marvel Comics books kind of approach,
Sure.
it's funnier hell to us because that's not the way it is at all.
Yeah.
Nobody's actually a superhero. Everybody's really gotta lift all the weight and do swim all those miles and climb all those mountains without any superpower. You're just human, and you get beat up and you get burned down, and you look like crap at the end of a mission. You don't look like Captain America with a twinkling bright smile. You look like you've been dragged behind a truck.
Mhm.
And the other thing is nothing that actually happens in the mission that as it was planned to be done almost ever happens the way you planned it before you went. So the irony is you're forced to plan it, you're forced to rehearse it, you go there and everything's it's all over the place. Everything's wrong. You're supposed to walk in, you can't walk in, a guy twists his ankle, now you gotta steal a truck, you're worried about somebody finding out the truck's been stole. You can get everybody into the truck, but you got guys hanging on the outside of the truck. Yeah, somebody's gonna spot you, and it starts to look funny. It starts to look like Keystone Cops, but you're just improvising and adapting, and then you get there and you get the job done somehow, and then you get out of there. And then when you see a bunch of guys, spec ops guys sit around a fire over a beer, they'll tell nothing but funny stories like that. Nobody ever says, "Remember that one where we planned it, we rehearsed it, and we went in
Everything went
there,
according to
snuck in there, and boom, boom, bam, got out there," and got home and we still had enough time for a good night's sleep. Nobody ever says that because there's no value in it.
Mhm.
You're learning anything from it. You're not reinforcing the chaos and stuff to the younger guys that you're talking to, telling them a story, and it's not funny, so it's not worth wasting any time on.
So would you describe that ability as, like, the ability to stay playful or, match the intensity of a situation with playfulness? Something like that? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I think playfulness and, reframing is probably more in the moment
Mhm,
when something goes wrong because you have to reposition your mind. You have to say, "Okay, my assumptions are out the window. Clear your mind, complete blank slate. What do I know? What can I do?
mhm,
And what am I trained to do? What are my tools? And what are my people's capabilities?" And then boom. And you have to do that. I was an officer. You had to do that in 30 to 45 seconds if something changed. So the reframing exercise is something you're taught to do too. They change stuff on you all the time. So in training, so because they know it's going to happen in combat. Um, the playfulness, yeah. I mean, I just talked to a command sergeant major Green Beret last week. Hadn't talked to him in about 2.5 years.
mhm,
About a minute into that call, we were laughing our ass off. I mean, because we take a lot of things very lightly and we're kind of easygoing. I
mhm,
think the more experience you have, the more easygoing you get because the perspective is the stuff other people are worried about isn't anywhere near as bad as it could be.
mhm.
And that adds to that playfulness.
So, besides the playfulness, or would you say that is that, like, the number one mental tool to have, or are there other tools in your toolkit that you think would be really important for the average person to learn if they could, to be more effective in life?
So there's it's kind of off the psychology a little bit. So we're taught all the skills, but what we've never been consciously or directly taught is to try to improve ourselves unilaterally. And what I mean by that is there's training and there's training provided to you, there's training situations and training and exercises that are all set up for you all the
Mhm,
time. But I would say to a man, most SEALs and Green Berets will take any free time they have and be working on whatever they think their weaknesses are. And they'll volunteer for things that are outside their area of expertise because they consider that to be a weakness. Now, the point of that is when the bullets start flying, you want to be as valuable as you possibly can be. And the only way you can get to that point is to do whatever you have to do up to that point. Because when the phone rings and somebody says, go, there's no more time for training. There's no more time for extra push up. You're done. Whatever you have, whatever you've got is what you're going with, whether it's a person, your individual capabilities, or the team. So there's a lot of effort in training each other, but there's also individual effort in trying to shore up or strengthen weak areas in our kind of suite of skill sets. And I think that adds to a high level of confidence, not so much arrogance, but just really, really high level of confidence in your ability to produce and execute and also the feeling that everybody can rely on you to pull your weight and to do what you got to do when the moment happens. And because you're talking to, everybody else is doing the same thing.
mhm.
So I mean, what would you do if you were on a football team and you had really hard practice, but on Saturday you came up, just drove by the school and there was some guy out there, dragging sleds and doing sprint drills all by himself, and he was a running back. What would you think of that? You think he wants to be better than just what the coaches are.
Yeah, right. He's
And that's
he's
the
a
kind of
dedicated
mindset,
player.
right? So that's poured in there. The confidence helps with the reframing. You feel like you can do it. The confidence helps with the playfulness and the humor because
Mhm.
you're comfortable. You're very, very comfortable. Takes about 2 years after you get through the selection course before you start to get into that zone where you say, "I think I know what I'm doing. I think I'm a participant, but I'm also a contributor now."
Mhm. Takes 2 years, huh? It's
Yeah,
a lot
it
of
but
hell to go through.
2.5 to $3 million per SEAL,
Wow.
at the 2-year mark when they're considered basically trained and ready to go to war.
So I've got maybe like a backwards question for you, but um, I've I've talked to quite a few folks who have been through intensive military training, and many of them have gone into applying what they learned in business contexts and things like that. I'm curious about kind of the flip side of what have you learned as a civilian in business that being a SEAL didn't prepare you for?
Well, I think the biggest shock, and I've been a leader in business pretty much for the last 20 years, one way or the other. The biggest shock was that that I was a pampered recipient of our taxpayers' dollars delivering these highly trained, highly motivated, psychologically resilient people for me to lead.
Mhm,
And if one of them broke an ankle, I could go down the hallway and say, "Hey, I need another communications expert," and one would show up the next morning, fully capable, fully trained.
mhm,
And when I got out, that ain't the way it is, right? So you mentor people mostly in leadership functions. There's a lot of mentoring and coaching going on to help people because they're eventually gonna move up in rank and start to assume more and more leadership roles. But you don't have to motivate anybody. The instructors at Buds don't motivate you. When you're in a SEAL team, there's not some guy walking up going, "You guys are doing great." There's none of that, right? Because you're all
yeah,
self-driven. You get outside and you say there's 30 employees, maybe 2 of them are self-driven.
mhm,
The other 28 are just trying to pay their bills and have a little free time to have some fun with their friends. And then the other aspect of it is the mission focus. So in the military, and I'd say this would be the same with, say, firefighters or EMT in the civilian side, you know what your purpose is, you know what your mission is, and you know somebody's gonna ask you to do that. So you're preparing for a very specific moment in your life. And you know if you're not any good at what you do, you're gonna live with that, the consequences of that. So as an EMT, you're always preparing and training. As a fireman, the guys are always preparing and training, and SEALs are no different. And then you get out and the same ratio, basically about 2 or 3 out of 30 employees care really about where the company's going or what it's doing or if it survives long term. They're not thinking strategically, they're not thinking business plan. They don't want it to go down the tubes because they have a paycheck coming from it.
mhm,
But if you told everybody, "Hey, we need everybody to pull together who are going through some hard times and it may last 4 or 5 months, but we have a plan for it." If you told them all that information, you'd lose 10% of the population.
mhm,
They'd jump ship because their main reason for working and going to some place to work is to pay the bills, and so the missions aren't aligned. The missions of every one of those 30 employees is not aligned with each other, and they're not aligned with the people that own the company and maybe not with the people that are leading that company. And it could be a for-profit, a nonprofit, it could be, a bureaucracy like in government, and it took me a while to realize that's okay. That makes sense. That's we're not nobody's asking anybody to, put their life on the line for God and country. Nobody's asking some higher purpose, greater purpose, sacrifice from anybody, and it'd be kinda ludicrous if you did. I mean, if you got everybody in a room and said, "I want you to, give your life for, Beeswax Tire Company." You know,
sure,
you'd never say that, right? So, then what are you left with? What you're left with is there some level of camaraderie or some level of common motivation towards some shorter term objective that is a collective, you know, is understood and agreed to collectively so that you can get kind of a loyalty to something, a loyalty to each other. And I've been working on that for years, I've been writing about that for years. In a very small company where you've handpicked the people to come in,
mhm,
kind of like the SEALs, right? You've hand selected people. You're looking for people that are grinders, but you're looking for people that have open minds. You're looking for people that will work weekends. They'll stay up 36 hours to finish a project because they know it's important. Okay, so you do that. But every one of those stories of eating pizza under the table and all that stuff, and every Silicon Valley story, eventually they have to become a company. And
mhm,
they bring in the strangers. And when they bring in the strangers, and all the standard skill sets like the accountants and the supply chain experts and all that, they're not going to be like the people that they brought in, and they're not
Yeah.
going to work all weekend and eat pizza at midnight, and they lose their culture. And there's lots written about that too. So it's achievable in the beginning with a small company, or if you're going to keep a small company, like if it was a design company, that's all they did, you could probably sustain that for a long, long time, and it'd probably be a fun place to live or work. But if you have a large organization, you walk in there, 500 people, 1,000 people, man, I tell you, it's not even like turning a battleship around in a bathtub. Nobody would care, and so nobody would be helping you turn the battleship around. You just and that's something that doesn't convey in military leadership experience at all. You have to deal
Yeah.
with reality, and the mission aspect of it too doesn't convey.
Yeah. So you can't log PT your employees. You have to do something different. So if you're like, let's say you were helping out or consulting for a company with 130 people. So they're not at the initial startup level. They're no longer pizza under the table level, but they're also not huge. Like
Right.
at that level, what are you thinking? What are you going to bring in? How would you bond the team or get them pointed in a direction effectively?
The first thing I would take the top leaders and put them through exercises to confirm their level of commitment and to show them what it feels like to care about the mission, to care about each other. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that.
Jumping jacks?
You know what? Jumping jacks is one of them.
Yeah.
People that share, that's the old Stockholm syndrome in a way. The people that share trauma, whether it's a plane crash, whatever, they eventually bond together because they've gone through it together
Yeah.
and they have a common emotional attachment or connection. So, yeah, you don't cause them to bleed or anything like that. But what you do is you put them through crises. You can do it with tabletop exercises. You change the assumptions, after an hour or two, and then you change the leadership or you remove the leadership. So now they'll start from scratch, or somebody was the alpha trying to push everything, and you basically put them in a state of chaos
Mhm.
where they're going to succeed, but they're only going to get halfway there or 85% of the way there. And the time you start taking some of the time that they had away from them, and so that jacks up the stress. And then you stop and you say, okay, let's talk about what was going through your mind. Let's talk about what you were feeling. Let's talk about whether you accomplished this. Why didn't you accomplish anything in this amount of time? So you can do that with a team trying to create a new marketing campaign for the company, or develop a completely different supply chain for the company. And so it can be within their technical expertise and knowledge,
Mhm.
but they still have to build something, and they have to build it under duress and stress. And some people handle that, right? Some people, it's what we were talking about before. You just, okay, so somebody moved my cheese. Well, all right. So what's the new setup? What's the new information? Let scrap the plan, or is there anything we can salvage from it? And you start from scratch. And you do it very calmly and very maturely, even like I just did with a smile on your face, like, okay, this is the way it goes. Because business is the same thing as war. As far as you think you're the only person working on a plan.
Mhm.
Every business in your market is working on a plan. And then all the customers are deciding whether they would even want to buy your product or service anymore. You don't even know because you're not in their heads. And so
Yeah.
whatever you do, and the longer you take to do it, you roll it out and go, ta-da! And the world's passed you by and it's a moot point. And you're like, so you can do it, but you have to do it at the top. If you do it at the top, you have a chance, because people that are following leaders like to see the leaders bonded together, and there's no space between their points of view. And if they're motivated and they have a sense of humor, and when things go wrong, they accept something's wrong, but they don't turn around and look for a scapegoat, or don't, look for somebody to fire or whatever. They bring everybody in the room and say, let's learn from this thing. So now you're bringing the group in and starting to bond them together as a collective brain trust, instead of a whole bunch of people running for the corners, hoping they don't get the little cat laser on their map, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really how you have to do it, from the top down. If you go into an organization and the top isn't willing to do that or capable of doing that, you're not gonna turn the lower part of the company into, 40 or 50 or 100 individual little super leaders, and somehow they're going to carry it. It won't work that way.
Mhm.
The other thing you can do is, depending on how companies are set up, you can chunk them into smaller groups, whether it's project teams or just groups. And it's easier to do all these things I'm talking about with 7 to 10 people than it is to do it with 70 to 100 people.
Mhm.
So it's easier to train them. It's easier to get their points of view to kind of rotate around, the perspectives to change. And you could actually work from one end of the company that way and start working across the board.
It's
By
kinda like different departments or
Yeah,
business units.
but you could call it a department. Departments are kind of a thrower from the post World War II corporate America, copying of the way the U.S. Army, did all the supply chain and manufacturing. I mean, most everything was copied in the 1950s off of the efficiency of the U.S. Army in World War II. So
Hmm.
departments, divisions, why do
Mhm.
we call them divisions? Because, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of militarism and architecture in the org chart structure, which works if you're trying to move thousands and thousands and thousands of airplanes across the world and build them first. But it's kind of clunky, and it's in the way when, I mean, a real organization. And there was a woman, I wish I could remember her name, that made some hay on this. She went in and would analyze an organization's actual communication flow.
Mhm.
And she said most organizations, even small organizations, look more like an ant farm rather than our org chart. There's all kinds of
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
wiggly lines going all over the place, and then there's 2 or 3 people who are the main communicators, the main, kinda the heart of the company. They're the ones that are making sure the critical thing they heard gets to the right person, and they're
Mhm.
not getting paid any more to do it. Yet, if you
Yeah,
pull these
yeah.
people out, everything would collapse. So these are like internal influencers that are doing it out of the good of their heart of their professionalism, whatever. And so she would say, map the organization the way I do, find these critical people, pay them 3 times what they're paid right now, and just step back and let them continue to help things along,
That's
right?
pretty
Which is
interesting.
which is
Yeah,
not a rank equals compensation kind of thing, which again is kind of a military point of view.
right. Interesting. Okay, so you'd work with people at the top or you'd work with groups 7 to 10, you said. And so you wouldn't spend any time working with people, let's say, at the bottom of the org chart.
Not unless they're, well, first off, to do the chunking of the teams or groups approach, the 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 people at the top would have to be willing to let that happen. So you're still trying to get the top focused in the right way and agreeing, because the thing was, I'm going to disrupt your org chart. I'm going to disrupt the way you do business.
Mhm.
Instead of you waiting for 5 different, it's kind of like the old thing with website design. How many clicks does it take to get to the thing you're looking for?
Yeah, yeah.
How many people does it take for a CEO to get down to the person that's actually doing the job and knows exactly what the truth is? And so it's more than just flattening an organization from a communications speed and quality of information standpoint. It's also, when you do that, the CEO can actually participate in briefbacks or observe various chunk teams of people that are attacking different aspects of the company. And some of them can be hybrid. They can be cross talent. So you can have accounting people in with sales and marketing, because they're putting together pricing structures, and pricing structures are their numbers, and there's people that look at that, who are numbers people, and see something that the marketing people didn't see when they're just looking at,
Mhm.
market price, um, in price points, or when the salespeople are arguing. Salespeople always want the price as low as possible. Marketing always wants it as high as possible. Finance usually wants it as high as possible. But if you get them all in a room together, instead of being adversaries, they have to be architects,
Mhm.
right? And you could throw a couple of people that aren't in manufacturing. You could grab a couple of people that are users of the product off the street, have them in there and give them just a completely objective, outside point of view. Because you get into group think and group speak, and you start sounding like an MBA. And I don't know when you got your MBA, but if it was like when I got my MBA, 1992, things have changed. People
Yeah.
have changed. Everything's changed. So you can't keep thinking the same way. And the way to disrupt that is to bring in outside influences. So it can be an ad hoc team or it can be a permanent team that, attacks and builds something that is critical, like a pricing structure.
Mhm.
You do the same thing with designing. You know, engineers always, they give you you ask for something that's elegant and everything, and they give you something that looks like a Foot Locker and it's 10
Yeah.
times too heavy. So, Steve Jobs was good at that, right? But he was all in his own head. And he had the one designer guy. They kept saying, that's not elegant. That's not attractive. That's not gonna, we want this in a pocket or we want this to be carried this way. And the engineers were like, we can't do that. And
Yeah.
so he would fire those engineers and keep bringing engineers. Finally, he would say, I think we can figure out a way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a cross culture of design, marketing, and technology/engineering.
What would you recommend for individuals? So not necessarily business aspect, but individuals who want to increase their mental resilience and adaptability.
One's an internal exercise. Every time you feel stressed, you get that fight or flight kind of a feeling.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of control your breathing and clear your mind and put everything in perspective. Think about how bad is it compared to everything else? How bad is it compared to the worst thing that could happen? I'll give you a case in point. You think you might lose your job. So you start hyperventilating and you change your whole behavior for a week because you think you might lose your job.
Mhm.
What's worse than thinking you might lose your job? Losing your job. All right. So then you say, okay, if I lost my job, what would I have to do?
Mhm.
And you convert the fear, whatever is the catalyst for your fear or your flight, into an execution project, a preparedness plan. That's a forward leaning, positive mental exercise. Sitting back and hoping you don't get fired is not. And that's like those 2 pals I told you about before, I was a
Mhm.
teenager.
Yeah.
So, and I tell that I got 5 kids. Every time this has come up, I've said the same thing. Okay, go through the exercise. What are you gonna do? You just got fired. You got fired today. What's your first step? What's your second step? Who are you gonna contact? You don't know anybody? Start building up a network. Start building up a database. Refresh your resume. And what happens is that disconnects the fear and the fight or flight mechanism because your brain is now focused on action,
Mhm.
and it's positive action. Now, if you do that every time you have a challenge, it's a physical challenge. Okay. What happens if you break your leg and you like working out? Some people would say, I can't work out until this cast is off.
Mhm.
All right. So you'd say, all right, you can't work out until the cast is off. You can't work out with that leg. Well, I don't want the other leg to get, you know, bigger than this leg. Fine. So from the waist up, you can work out.
Mhm.
And they've got hand exercise machines where you can sit there and crank them like this and get cardio out of it. There's all kinds of
Right.
stuff you can do. So go research that, find a gym that has all that stuff, get a membership, find somebody that'll take you there and work out until the cast is off. And
Mhm.
then taper down on your upper body stuff and start focusing on rehabbing your lower body. So what did I do? It sounds motivational, but it's not really. It's mechanical. It's like just get your mind out of the perspective of this sucks, it sucks, it's never gonna be any better, woe is me, and into this sucks, but what am I gonna do about it?
Mhm.
And that's the way I would tell anybody to do something like that. If they come to me one-off with a one-off situation, it's the same way I would talk to them. If you start to get that kind of game plan, it doesn't matter after a while, you start taking everything in that's negative the same way. Well, how does that really affect me? Proportionally, is it as bad as I think it's gonna be? Alright, if I really think there's a probability this is gonna happen, what can I start doing now? What kind of action can I take? And
Yeah. All right. Can I turn this into I want to get the process straight in my head. So I have I'm noticing a stress response. I'm feeling a little bit stressed. First thing you said to do is breathe. So do you have a specific way that you breathe or just take a deep breath?
just take a deep breath and by doing so, you're acknowledging that you weren't in control of your emotions.
Mhm.
So it's a way to break that behavior. You don't have to go into a long
Okay.
long
Yep.
exercise.
Yep. All right. Taking a deep breath, then thinking, what is the
Clear your mind.
clear my mind? Okay. Do
Clear
you
your
have a
mind
specific
completely. Try to get
process for that?
all that. I basically, you can envision like a whiteboard in your mind.
Okay. Yeah, I've done that.
One I've seen people say you write up on the whiteboard whatever the issue is, and
Mhm.
then visualize you taking an eraser and wiping it out.
Okay.
And again, it's an exercise of kind of affirmation that you're in control, and now the whiteboard's clean and ready for you to act.
Okay. Deep breath, whiteboard. On the whiteboard, or next step would be what's what's the worst that could happen, or what's worse than this, or
Um, well, what I usually do is assume this just happened for real. If
okay.
you're afraid of it happening, it's
Mhm.
because most people are concerned about things that never actually happen, right?
Yeah, okay. So what's the thing I'm afraid of? Okay, let's say it happened. What do I do about it? Is that
Yeah.
the
What
question
can
you're
I
asking?
do about it? What
What
should
can I
I
do
do?
about it?
And
Okay.
then now you fill the whiteboard with action steps.
Okay.
I
Got it.
need to stop spending so much. I need to build my savings up. I need to redo my resume. I mean, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think the first time you shared, you said, like, what would be the first step? What would be the second step? Thinking through that process. Okay. And, if I ran into something where it's like, well, so you gave the example of losing your job, I need to make connections, or I don't have any connections. Okay, well, that gives me this, like, a new kinda like start over. Okay, well, that's a new problem. What's the first step to make a connection? Like, kinda repeat that cycle of, okay, what's that situation? What's first thing
Yep.
I could do? Just keep following that. And then, uh, okay, one thing I could see happening here is just endless list making. So, do you have any sort of guiding function or principle for at what point you stop making lists and start taking action?
In a true brainstorming effort, I would just put everything on a piece of paper and then sit back and look at them and then put them in the time order, and put notes to the next of them. Like, say, for example, I don't know if I don't know how to do this, or I don't know who to talk to. What you do is you put that down, and then the answer next to it is find somebody who can help me. Find somebody who knows somebody who can help me. In other words, you don't let anything sit there as oh, I can't do it or it can't be done. You put a
Mhm,
little answer. What action do I have to take to make that happen? And then you can
mhm.
order them in. If you're really concerned something's going to happen, I'd order them in time. What's the most critical thing first on, and then
Would you
I
set any
wouldn't put
limits on that, brainstorming process?
um I wouldn't put any limits on it, because I think what happens is as you write it all down, if you start to put it in the order that makes sense from the most important down, you start to see the kind of frivolous stuff.
Mhm,
Like if it says, get a new suit. That might not be as important as get your resume ready, get
mhm,
your contacts out there, or update your social media stuff. Um, because you already have 3 suits.
mhm,
But in my brainstorming session, you put that down because I need to refresh my wardrobe, whatever. Um, yeah, it's not analysis paralysis by analysis kind of a thing. It's more brainstorming, throw it all up there, and then order it, and then put your action steps or your sources of resources available,
mhm.
and then start executing, start doing it. So it goes from a list to an action plan. It's actually an action plan, not just a mental exercise.
Mhm. Okay. So here, I'm gonna run myself through it again. So let's say I'm feeling a little stressed. Maybe I'm worried about, I need to find something to worry about. Taxes. Everybody deals with taxes. Death and taxes, right? So I can go with taxes. Tax season. I'm feeling stressed. Maybe I need to. All right. Well, first thing I would do is take a deep breath. Whiteboard. Okay, clear my mind. I've wiped the whiteboard in my brain. I'm thinking, all right, let's say that I get a letter from the IRS or something. Maybe that's the thing I'm afraid of, that I did something wrong. Okay, what would be the first thing I would do about that? And then I would actually write this down. Step one, step
Yeah.
two, anything I didn't know how to do.
Reread the letter, highlight key sections
Okay,
in the
yep.
letter, um, copy down the contact information,
Mhm.
reach out to my accountant, set up a
Yeah.
call with my yeah.
Yeah, and anything where it's like, "Oh, I can't do that," or "I don't know how to do that," then that I have to take a, "Okay, well, what would I need to do to figure that out?" or
Or
something like
who can I
a
call,
guide.
or who can I contact that might know? either
Okay.
how or somebody that does.
Yep. Continue that and then reorganize the list based on priority order or importance order or what would I do first, second, third, and so on. And then once I'm satisfied with my list, start action step number one. Just go for it. Take
Order
action
it.
now.
Well, look at your list to make sure that the priorities are kind of in order. And I say
Yeah.
priorities are more by time, and then start knocking them off. I mean,
Okay.
as a to-do list. Yeah. It's not, it's the same process combat leaders are taught. You have basic fundamental concerns if you're in a bad spot. So you get there and let's say everything's changed, and all of a sudden the bad guys are changing your plan. So in your mind, you basically can't use the plan anymore.
Mhm.
So you have to clear your mind of the plan, and
Yep.
you have to start saying, "What do I need?" Well, I need to put my guys behind something that stops bullets.
Mhm.
I need to get a call out to somebody that I'm in this situation. So somebody knows I'm in a situation. So now what I've done now is there's other allies that are now thinking up a solution while I'm thinking of my local solution. They're coming up with a bigger
Right.
solution.
Yeah.
I need to get a head count on my guys. I need to figure out what I'm up against by looking at the head count of the bad guys, and then I have to decide whether I'm gonna stay here and fight or I'm gonna run. And if I'm
Mhm.
gonna run, which direction am I gonna run? See? And this is
Yeah.
all going
Yeah.
through your head really fast, but if you sat there and go, "The plan's not working," or you go, "Well, the plan said go forward anyway," that's
Yeah.
the charge of the light brigade stuff. You don't do that. So, I'm telling you it works, and you can practice it, and after you
Mhm.
practice it for a while, it becomes like an automatic behavior. Just like for a lot of people, automatic behavior is to immediately cocoon up and just run the bad information through your head until you feel like you have no power in the universe and there's nobody will help you and there's nothing can be done. And whatever you're concerned about is absolutely going to happen.
Yeah.
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 Worst case consequences, and it's going to happen.
Yeah. I like to articulate these in like really straightforward, like here's the actual steps because I've noticed a pattern both in myself and other people to hear something and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But not actually do it. It's just like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'd probably do that if I were in the" but that's not what we do, right? And so, it's okay, what is the specific I wanna practice it mentally, make sure I actually okay, I just ran through that in my head. I didn't just hear somebody else talk about it. I can imagine myself doing that, and then practice it so it's actually useful and it's there when I need it. So, I appreciate you going in depth on the step-by-step
And
process.
the other thing you can do is we all get good ideas and bad ideas, and we get them all the time. I've taken on the habit of writing them down.
Yeah.
Things pop into my head. It could be the title of a book. It could be what I think would be a great title for or name for a company. It could be, a different way of buying something or a different way of making something. And if it's in the moment, it pops in my head,
Mhm.
I either write it down, and if I'm not in a position where I can write it down, I'll send myself a text with a kind of laid out real quick. And then I kind of collect it all later on, look at it, and some of it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
it doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
sometimes there's some pretty interesting stuff there. And this is not a reaction to fight or flight and fear and all that. This is just kind of tapping into your brain's natural continuum of creativity and innovation and insight that we tend to ignore because we're so busy just living life.
Yeah. Have you read the book The Martian?
No.
Okay. Well, I recommend that to anyone out there. It's the character in the book is basically stranded on Mars, and it's like him trying to figure out how to keep surviving another day. And it's very much the same thought process. It's like, how do you solve any problem? You have to be able to respond when all the plans go out the window and start fresh and think through solutions and then take action. And if you sit around, then, well, especially if you're stranded on Mars, you can't sit around very
Yeah.
long before you're dead. So, yeah, it's a great book if anyone likes to read stories about people problem solving. It's a good sci-fi book. But anyway, I think there's a movie too. Um, forget who.
Yeah. The other thing that's good about that, and there's a SEAL Admiral McRaven who did a speech in Texas University a few years back. You look up Admiral McRaven, Navy SEAL. Um, you'll find it's on YouTube and everything. But a lot of SEALs made fun of it at the time because he said, "What you want to do if you want to be successful is wake up every morning and make your bed.
Mhm.
Now you've got one thing accomplished. You've accomplished something. Your
Yeah.
day has now got one positive event." And another SEAL I listened to the other day on, wasn't a podcast interview. He said that a chief told him something similar. He said, wake up. That's the first accomplishment. Get out of bed. That's the second accomplishment. Make your bed. That's the third. Brush your teeth. You've got 4 down already.
Yeah.
And then he said, if you think about how many people have difficulty doing the second thing, getting out of bed, it sounds like a really simple, stupid thing. But if I was on Mars or if I was on a desert island, I would have to say to myself, I have to have a plan every morning. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to get up
Yeah.
and then take my initial actions of survival. And then I'll have something I have to build or something something I have to do to keep myself occupied. And you don't have to become a slave to it, but you have to understand those things are valuable.
Yeah. And you have to be able to pivot when things don't work and not like sit around being frustrated. Especially if you're in a survival situation, there's not enough time for that. You can't do that for very long before it gets real bad. Yeah. So I'd love to keep talking. I do have a hard stop. So I'd love to, if anyone's listening, which I'm sure people are, how would you like them to reach out to you? Would you like them to reach out to you? What information would you put out there for people who are interested in more?
Yeah. They can just go to martystrong.com. I've got access to all my books and my speaking programs, my background. It's all there. martystrong.com.
All right, Marty Strong. Thank you so much, Marty. It was a pleasure to talk to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Collin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.